The system defines a simple rule. A usage benefit is granted through coupons or credits. That benefit disappears at a fixed expiration point. The rule establishes a hard boundary where unused value converts directly into loss. The presence of expiration creates a non-linear incentive. Using early and using late deliver the same nominal benefit. Avoiding expiration loss becomes more important than optimizing usage timing. Behavior begins to orient around the deadline rather than underlying need. At first, usage appears evenly distributed. Users have full visibility of the expiration window. There is no immediate pressure to act early. The system temporarily stabilizes in a low urgency state where action is deferred. This stability is not neutral. Delaying usage preserves optionality until the last possible moment. Waiting becomes the dominant strategy because early action carries opportunity cost. The system accumulates latent demand without visible consumption. The visible behavior suggests flexibility. It appears users are simply choosing when it is convenient to act. But convenience does not explain the synchronized delay across users. The alignment emerges from the shared expiration constraint. As the deadline approaches, the incentive landscape shifts abruptly. The cost of inaction rises from zero to total loss. The decision is no longer about optimal use, but about preventing expiration. Usage becomes driven by avoidance of penalty rather than pursuit of value. This shift compresses decision timing. Users who delayed now face the same narrowing window. Individual timing decisions begin to overlap. The system transitions from dispersed activity to concentrated action. The pattern that emerges is clustering. Usage events bunch near the expiration boundary. The system no longer reflects organic demand cycles. Instead, it reflects synchronized reactions to the same cutoff. The clustering effect creates local congestion. Resources, attention, or interfaces experience sudden spikes in load. What was designed as flexible usage becomes operationally concentrated. The system absorbs uneven pressure as a result. The original assumption was that expiration encourages utilization, but it does not distribute utilization evenly across time. It redistributes usage toward the boundary condition. The incentive shifts behavior without smoothing demand. The system now exhibits burst dynamics. Long periods of inactivity are followed by sharp spikes. These spikes are not random. They are structurally induced by the fixed expiration visibility. The behavior appears inefficient. Users are not maximizing the intrinsic value of the benefit, but the behavior is consistent with minimizing loss. The system prioritizes expiration avoidance over optimal consumption. Repeated cycles reinforce the pattern. Users learn that waiting carries no penalty until the threshold approaches. Early usage does not provide additional reward. The equilibrium continues to favor delayed action. Over time, this creates predictable timing behavior. Usage becomes anchored to the expiration schedule. The system's temporal distribution is no longer organic. It is shaped by the structure of the rule itself. The outcome resembles urgency-driven behavior, but urgency is not inherent to the usage need. It is manufactured by the deadline. The system generates artificial pressure through its incentive design. This leads to a divergence between need and action. Consumption does not align with when value is highest. It aligns with when loss becomes imminent. The signal of usage no longer reflects real demand. The system becomes sensitive to visibility of the deadline. Clear expiration signals amplify clustering behavior. Any increase in transparency strengthens synchronization. The rule's clarity intensifies its own side effects. At scale, the pattern stabilizes. Each cycle reproduces the same temporal distortion. Users delay, then converge, then release demand in bursts. The system settles into a repeating loop of compression and release. The final equilibrium is not evenly distributed utilization. It is burst usage concentrated around expiration points. The system operates in cycles of inactivity and overload. This pattern persists because it is the rational response to the incentive structure. The burst pattern does not remain isolated to individual timing decisions. As more users converge on the same deadline window, the system begins to internalize this clustering as a normal operating condition. What was initially a reaction becomes an expected load profile. The system's baseline shifts toward anticipating spikes rather than smoothing demand. This expectation feeds back into user behavior. When burst periods become predictable, users implicitly rely on them as the default moment for action. The absence of early activity reinforces the perception that waiting is still optimal. The delay strategy stabilizes further as the system validates it through repeated cycles. Time horizon mismatch becomes structurally embedded. The system rewards completion before expiration, regardless of when the benefit would have been most efficiently used. Short-term avoidance of loss overrides any longer-term distribution of usage. Temporal alignment with actual need becomes increasingly irrelevant. This mismatch accumulates across cycles. Unused capacity early in the cycle cannot be recovered once the burst arrives. The system alternates between underutilization and overload without correcting either state. Efficiency losses compound as each cycle repeats the same compression. Visibility of expiration continues to amplify coordination without communication. Each user reacts independently, yet the shared information structure produces synchronized behavior. The system exhibits coordination without interaction. This creates a feedback loop where predictability of clustering strengthens future clustering. The system begins to optimize around its own distortion. Interfaces, processes, or resource allocation adapt to handle peak load conditions. These adaptations do not remove the clustering. They normalize it as a fixed constraint. Normalization reduces the perceived cost of delay. If the system can absorb bursts, the penalty for waiting appears minimal until the final moment. This further discourages early usage. The equilibrium tightens around the deadline as the dominant coordination point. At scale, small variations in individual timing no longer matter. The aggregation effect overrides individual differences. Even users who act slightly earlier are pulled into the same compressed window. The system enforces convergence through collective behavior. The clustering also compresses decision quality. When many actions are taken under time pressure, the evaluation of how to use the benefit becomes secondary. The primary objective remains avoiding expiration. This shifts usage from selective to compulsory execution. This creates a divergence between allocation and utility. Resources are consumed not because they are most valuable at that moment, but because they must be used. The system records high utilization rates, but the timing of that utilization no longer reflects meaningful demand. A reinforcing loop emerges between visibility and compression. Clearer deadlines increase synchronization. Greater synchronization increases burst intensity. Stronger bursts reinforce the reliance on deadlines as the organizing structure. This loop stabilizes even when inefficiencies are visible. The system does not self-correct because no individual actor benefits from deviating early. Early usage still sacrifices optionality without reducing systemic congestion. The rational response remains aligned with delay. There is a limit to how much compression the system can absorb. As bursts intensify, marginal cost during peak periods increases, but this cost is experienced collectively and briefly. It does not persist long enough to alter individual strategy. This creates a narrow window of systemic strain. Outside the burst, the system appears underutilized and stable. Within the burst, it becomes temporarily saturated. The contrast between these states reinforces the cyclical nature of the system. At this point, the system exhibits a form of temporal lock-in. The distribution of behavior is no longer flexible. It is anchored to the expiration boundary. Changing individual timing would require abandoning the dominant incentive structure. One analytical uncertainty remains. If expiration visibility were reduced or made ambiguous, clustering might weaken. But within the current structure of fixed and visible deadlines, this alternative path is not realized. The system continues to reinforce the same compressed timing equilibrium. The result is a stable pattern of deadline-driven convergence. Each cycle reaffirms that waiting is rational until it is no longer safe. The system does not disperse behavior over time. It concentrates it repeatedly at the same boundary. The system now rewards actions that occur close to expiration rather than actions that align with actual need. Using early provides no additional benefit, while using late avoids a total loss. The incentive gradient shifts entirely toward deadline proximity, narrowing rational behavior to last-minute execution. What the system ignores is timing quality. Whether the benefit is used efficiently or opportunistically no longer affects the outcome. Only the binary condition of use versus expiration remains relevant, constraining all decisions to that threshold. At the same time, the system penalizes unused balance more than misallocated usage. Letting value expire carries a definitive cost, while suboptimal use does not. This asymmetry locks behavior into a pattern where avoiding expiration dominates all other considerations. Compared to the initial state of flexible usage, the system no longer distributes behavior across time. It compresses it into predictable bursts anchored to fixed deadlines. The equilibrium stabilizes around synchronized, deadline-driven action as the only consistently rational response. Once this equilibrium forms, deviation becomes costly in relative terms. Acting earlier sacrifices optionality without reducing systemic pressure. The system sustains a cycle where timing is dictated by expiration, and behavior continues to cluster around it.